It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. So excited to talk with you about this particular book. We're on the line today with Terry Brennan Jr. He's the son of the former head football coach at Notre Dame University, Terry Brennan Sr., of course, way back in the 1950s. And, well, let's say good morning to Terry Brennan Jr. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. So Dad is still plugging away at the age of 93, huh?
He is. He's still pretty quick in that walker of his, but he's not as quick as he used to be.
Yeah. The book is called Though the Odds Be Great or Small, written by Terry Brennan Sr. and William Miners, about his amazing career as the head coach of Notre Dame, which began, what was he, 25 years old when he was named head coach at Notre Dame?
He was.
25 years old. And up and down seasons. The 1957 season was really a great season for Notre Dame football and for one particular game especially. We'll get into that, but I want to talk with you about a couple of other things. You know, there are very few people who can say, my dad was the head football coach at Notre Dame University. For you growing up, that just must have been a thrill.
Yeah, I was awfully young. I was, I was 6 when he was no longer the coach. So I remember things sort of in flashbacks, and my mom would confirm things for me, like, yes, that's right. No, that wasn't exactly how it happened. But yeah, it was different. I don't know how different because I was awfully young at the time, but I found out later that he's a very recognizable, famous person.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, he was a star running back at Notre Dame in the 1940s and did not go into pro football, which probably in today's day and age would be really unusual. Back then, I don't know that it was so unusual. It wasn't really a high-paying thing, was it?
No, and he was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, and they discussed, a contract, but he decided that if he wasn't going to get a no-cut contract, he had better things to do. So,
well, the amazing thing was he became a high school coach and really became one of the star-level high school coaches in Chicago, and that led to his being named the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, replacing a legend, Frank Leahy, at a very, very young age. How old was your dad at the time?
He was 25. He'd been personally recruited by Father Hesburgh to be the freshman coach, which he took over in 1953. So he was the freshman coach for a year. That was back when freshmen weren't eligible. And then, he was not counting on being the head coach next year, but lo and behold, he was.
Frank Leahy was one of the legendary coaches of the Fighting Irish, national championship coach, and a guy who was really considered to be one of the great ones. It was, and your dad played, of course, with Frank, under Frank. Frank sort of turned into a different guy, though, once he was not the head coach of Notre Dame in relation to the way that your dad was doing the job.
Yeah, I think he might have just forgotten what it was like to be in the position, which I think if he had remembered what it was like when he was coaching and what he wanted out of his players, I don't think he would have been as I would say, disagreeable, let's say.
As the coaching career then unfolded for your dad, there were some really good seasons. There were some down seasons as well. His coaching tenure coincided, you mentioned Father Hesburgh. It coincided with Notre Dame de-emphasizing football, which we just can't imagine in this day and age, but back then they did, and they cut the number of scholarships. Your dad had a real challenge.
Yeah, I think, what Father Hesburgh was trying to do was correct in terms of trying to elevate the academic profile of the school, and he was successful in doing that. I think where the strategy failed is I don't think de-emphasizing football mattered in terms of what he was trying to do, and in fact probably hurt him from a fundraising standpoint, which I think they finally realized in 1964.
Yeah, absolutely. So the seasons are, there are some really good ones. There are a couple of down ones. The 56 season was awful for your dad. Even though that was the year Paul Hornung won the Heisman Trophy, it was only a 2-win team, and it seemed like every game was one of those games that just tore your dad's heart out. Must have been awful difficult. And then you enter into an off season after a 2-win season. You know you're going to get criticism. But if you're the head coach of Notre Dame, that criticism is they don't turn that stuff down.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just the whole basis for this book. My late mother was always pushing him to write about his time at Notre Dame because it gets misinterpreted and misrepresented a lot. And I don't think people understood, that he was basically fighting with one hand tied behind his back, playing some really, really difficult schedules. But we came across while we were looking through all this memorabilia after he moved when my mother passed away. And one of the things in there was I think it was a 9-page single-space type postmortem of that 56 season, which really explains the frustration and what he needed to do to get turned around in 1957. It's an interesting document.
And you come then to write this book, or he does, along with William Miners, called "Though the Odds Be Great or Small." That phrase must have particular meaning within your dad's heart and within the family.
Well, it's out of the fight song, obviously. I think when you think about the odds being great or small, they were primarily great, with a limited roster playing people with unlimited scholarships. And I think you look at that 1957 season, I think there were 5 Saturdays in November. In 4 of them, they played consecutively against top 10 teams, one of them being Oklahoma that you mentioned. That's like playing bowl game every weekend for a whole month.
Yeah. So this is 1957. Oklahoma hasn't lost since, they lost to Notre Dame back in 53, right?
Yeah. I think, you're right. The 2 wins bookend the 47-game winning streak.
How about that? And it's at Oklahoma that Notre Dame comes in. They've gotten themselves beat up a little bit in their previous 2 games. Nobody's expecting that Notre Dame is going to come into Oklahoma and shut them down. That game was one of the great games in college football history.
Yeah, I think they were something like 29 or 30-point underdogs. And you're right, not an assignment most colleges would have accepted, playing at Norman in the first place, and let alone playing Oklahoma with a 47-game winning streak. But they were well scouted. I think that game, they're all circled on the calendar, but I think that one in particular, my dad had some ideas that he might be able to pull an upset, and he was successful in doing that with some really good defenses that he set up and shut down the Oklahoma offense, which nobody had done for 47 games.
The book is called Though the Odds Be Great or Small. Terry Brennan Jr. is on the line with us. His dad, Terry Brennan Sr., was the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Terry Brennan Sr. and William Miners got together and made this happen. Talk, if you would, about the process of coming up with this book itself. This had to be a labor of love for your dad, but it also had to be pretty difficult for him at the age of 93. I don't know how old he was when he started work on it. So
yeah, that actually the first day we sat down was I would say within days of the pandemic. So it was more difficult than usual because he was living in an independent living facility and they shut them all down to protect them, all the residents. So communicating with my dad, who's not the greatest technician, was challenging to say the least. But the real basis for it was he had a handwritten autobiography he had started, which we also found when we were gathering all this memorabilia, which gave us a real good insight that we could use to confirm facts with him after the fact, so that when you're trying to jog your memory at age, I think he was 91 at the time, you need a little stimulation, and that was very helpful in getting him into the thought process. And I think telling his story around the 1957 season made a lot of sense and worked out very well. When your dad was let go at Notre Dame, of course, that's always going to be a controversial thing, but his coaching career actually ended then. He decided not to pursue some other opportunities, and he did so for the family, right? Right. I think he had seen what goes on with that. Once you achieve that level, if you're the head coach of any other major university or the pros, all you're doing is guaranteeing you're going to move around from town to town, because it's a rare coach that is able to stay, 10, 10 years at any place, really, certainly in the pros. And he thought, I can do something better. He had his law degree that he'd earned while he was coaching Mount Carmel in Chicago, and said, I can do something better. And he took a job with Goldman Sachs. Not many former coaches can say that.
Yeah. And, of course, he did some broadcasting, too.
He did. I think he got on the radar screen with the Cardinals when he was coaching at Mount Carmel in Chicago when the Cardinals were there. They moved to St. Louis, and it was back when the NFL only televised away games. So every team had their own set of announcers. Mm-hmm. And he and Jack Drees did the St. Louis Cardinals football games, and that in turn led to doing the game of the week for the NCAA with Lindsey Nelson for many years.
Yeah, wow. The book is called Though the Odds Be Great or Small. Just a moment left with Terry Brennan Jr. What has your participation and your ability to watch your dad put together this book along with William Miners, what has that done for you in terms of the way you look at your dad and his life?
He's been in the public domain since high school, so I'm very familiar with just about everything he's done since he was a 13-year-old freshman at Marquette High in Milwaukee. So it's nice to see that story come together in a nice structured way. Everybody knows a little bit of a snippet here, a snippet there, but this really, I think, shows the timeline of his life and just how amazing it was.
It absolutely was, and as you read the book, that you really get a great new picture of who is a coaching legend. And it's called, once more, Though the Odds Be Great or Small. It's Loyola Press, and Terry, I actually have a galley proof of it. I don't even have the full book. Is it available yet?
Yeah, it came out yesterday. Like everything else, you can get it on Amazon, or you could get it through the LoyolaPress.com website.
Beautiful. Hey, thanks for spending some time with us. This has been fun.
Oh, glad to. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Have a great day today.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.